You were mentioning, when you first began, you started talking about the zebra mussels in our lake. And recognizing the fact that you are the Port Authority and are bringing in over 1,000 ships, I was wondering, number one, what is the monetary value that you reinvest into Lake Erie? Because I would assume that this is a big asset for you. And second of all, you mentioned that your investment went to a university in Minnesota to take care of that problem. And I'm just a little bit curious why that reinvestment didn't come in to this part of Ohio.
That's a good question. Someone else started it and then we helped it out, I think is the honest answer. There's a port in Minnesota that was very interested in this, and there was a specialty area at the University of Minnesota at Duluth, and they took the lead, and then a few ports actually joined and actually helped finance it and made it go. Where those research tanks are is important. How it's practiced, I would say, is more important. Federal legislation and state legislation is really quite critical. That's where we're spending most of our time. Perhaps one of the unique things that might come out of this conversation is a conversation and potential around technologies. There are lots of competing technologies being tested right now to basically kill off these invasive species, these organisms that are coming from other parts of the world. The same as when our ships go to Europe or to Asia, we take our organisms there. I'd love for Cleveland, in the environmental technologies area, to make a case for this, where we want to be this incubator for those sorts of technologies, and take the assets that are being developed in Minnesota in this tank that you really wouldn't want to be at, but take what we're learning from that and be a center for that, be a center for testing for that, and maybe even for development of the facilities that will manufacture the equipment. One thing I might just add, I mentioned legislation. Several states, including Ohio right now, are looking at state legislation which would identify how any ship coming from foreign sources, foreign ports, how they would treat invasive species. And that's a good thing our state's getting interested and sophisticated about that. It's not a good thing that the state's acting on its own, probably. We would like federal legislation that actually is tougher, or as tough, so that when you're a foreign ship, you know wherever you're going to stop in the United States, you've got to meet a standard. And if we don't do that, we're going to really hurt the industry and hurt ourselves at the same time. So a lot going on in invasive species. I'm hoping we've been involved. To be honest with you, I'd like us to be much more involved in the future. We're hiring an environmental manager expert, so we'll be the only port in the Great Lakes to actually have expertise on staff. In terms of your answer of what we've invested in the Great Lakes, well, it's hard to say. We do a variety of things where we invest in organizations and we participate in environmental groups, etc. I don't think we've scratched the surface because I don't think we've known how to deal with issues of the environment and protecting the Great Lakes as well as we could. I don't think most ports really understand what the how should I say, the unique culture of the Great Lakes and the protection that's required of that. And I think all of the ports in the Great Lakes are coming up to speed pretty quickly. But I'd like us to have even a larger view of the environment. So it's how we help protect the Great Lakes. And I mentioned invasive species. There's going to be an issue of what fuel ships burn. Right now they burn rather inexpensive fuel, and we'd like them to burn expensive fuel, which helps protect the air and the water. I think there's partnerships to be had with local environmental groups on some of those issues.
Mr. Wasserman, I followed from a middle distance the conflict between, I think, the county and the Port Authority over Whiskey Island. And I'd be interested in your take on how that came out and what you feel the port needs in the way of additional physical facilities, and whether the port will always be on the waterfront or if you're beginning to move to inland facilities too.
Well, thank you for the question. Before I arrived, our board said to the city of Cleveland, we'd be happy to move our port. I think there was a reference in the city's lakefront plan. Public policy in the city was around conversation, around connecting with the waterfront in more friendly ways. And so the proposition was made to the Port Authority that if you moved, that would be helpful. I think we had begun to look at location options prior to my arrival, and acknowledging that the lakefront plan, so there's an official plan for the city that actually makes a suggestion as to where the port should be. That is not far away from Wendy Park and Whiskey Island. It's actually creating a new island out in the lake. I asked for that study to be halted when I arrived so I could understand it better. Certainly knew in reading some of the newspaper accounts of over the last several years that it's been controversial, and wanted to protect the board and protect ourselves and understand who we were offending or if this was a good idea or not. It's still on hold, except now we're starting to look at that more carefully. I would say this, in terms of listening to my comments about what we think the potential of maritime is to be a major catalyst in the regional economic development of the community. If that's the case, we're probably going to need more land than we have today. The issue there is degree and scale. We have, all told, on 2 different pieces of property, about 130 acres. 130. The Port of Toledo, which is not as busy as ours, has 875 acres. So we're a tiny port, and yet I'm saying we have a great potential. So that doesn't seem to fit, does it? What we'd like to do is this. We'd like to expand the port when we move it, but probably not by much, maybe a couple hundred acres. And we're thinking very hard about how we become an urban port and use our land very efficiently with a lot of technology. It's a conversation about logistics and moving product off the port into inland distribution centers and another set of potentials for jobs and investment elsewhere in the community. We're looking at a variety of locations. We're not settled on anything. We're in talks with the city about what those options mean and the infrastructure to those options. I can say this, and we're intending to be very transparent about this. We don't care where it is as long as it works. We could stay where we're at. We could leave the city if there's no room, in effect, on the waterfront. We can go to a couple of locations if that works. We don't want to be a burden. We'd like the community to feel that we're an asset, and we're working really hard that that asset is an asset that's a good neighbor. So we're looking at options that are in the city center area on both sides of the Cuyahoga and wondering how this would work. I think the key issues for us are the amount of property, but we're not looking to have too much because we just don't think that's probably going to be viable in an urban city. And we're looking at issues of access, and that's road and rail, and making sure we're not disruptive as we grow and make sure that we use the infrastructure that exists in Cleveland wisely. We've got a lot of roads in Cleveland. We have a fair number of railroad systems. We're blessed with a lot of infrastructure. We probably could use that and not be disruptive to too many communities, we would say.